Hello everyone, welcome to ExamRat. My name is Shatabdi. I'm a medical student. In the last class, we talked about sound, how the application of reflection of sound works. We talked about reverberations, we talked about echoes. Um, Sound is a very simple chapter, okay, but it is also very scoring. As someone who has appeared in NEET and a lot of other competitive exams and have cleared it, I feel that this chapter is very easy and scoring, and also it's very interesting. So if you understand the concepts once, you'll never forget it, and the sums are also very easy. So if in case you've missed out on our previous sessions, you can easily just go on YouTube and watch our videos. They're all for free. Before starting today's session, let's just have a quick recap of what we had studied in the last class. Well, as I told you, we talked about reflection of sound. So we talked about echoes and reverberations, right? Yeah. So the thing was that reflection of sound followed the same laws as reflection of light, which was angle of incidence will always be equal to angle of emergence or reflection, provided that the point of incidence, the point of reflection, and the normal, they are all on the same plane. Okay. If the sound is reflected through a large wall once and then it comes back to the listener, then it is an echo. And if the reflection takes place multiple times, then it is called reverberations. Right? Okay. So example of this was if you clap in an empty ceremonial hall, then you find that the intensity of the sound gradually decreases, but you can at one point hear a lot of sounds together. Okay, we talked about ultrasound, how it is ultrasound. We talked about how it comprises of ultrasonic waves, which due to its very high frequency has a lot of industrial and medical uses. We talked about the range of sound, which was 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Anything above that would be ultrasonic, and anything less than 20 hertz will be infrasonic. Okay. So another interesting fact about ultrasound, which I did not mention in the last class, it was how bats produce ultrasound or ultrasonic waves. Now, why do they produce it? It's because bats are blind, right? They cannot see. So their only mode of locomotion is through detecting obstacles by producing ultrasonic waves, and the reflection that comes back to it, the bat basically calculates the reflection's time. So the bat basically calculates the time in which the echo happens, and accordingly it understands where the obstacle lies, like how far is the obstacle, and that is why it can go without getting hit by them. So it's a very interesting fact, and it can also be used as an example when they ask you what is the use of ultrasound or what is the use of echoes. Okay, so today we're going to talk about sonar. So sonar is another device that uses the principle of reflection of sound. So what happens is that basically sonar has a transmitter and a detector or receiver. So the transmitter, from the name also you can very well understand that it transmits or produces sound. Okay, so what's happening here is the sound is going, here is the seabed. Okay, so obviously it is getting reflected. Now for a reflection of sound, you do not need a polished surface. It just has to be a normal surface through which sound can be reflected. The sound hits the seabed and then again reflects back, and the receiver receives it. So by again the calculation of S equals to 2D by T or T into S by 2 equals to D, it calculates the distance of the seabed from the ship. Very simple. Now, instead of seabed, it can also happen that there are some corals or some treasures in it. So, it follows the same mechanism that it basically transmits the sound waves, and according to that, we can measure the distance between it and the ship. Very simple. Okay. So now another very important topic is the human ear. You'll also study about it in biology. So this is an internal structure of the ear. So what does it consist of? So this is the outermost part of your ear, right? Like the skin portion. So that is called the pinna. Okay, just color it. So this portion is basically your pinna. The skin flap and the cartilaginous part inside it. Okay. So that is the external part of the ear. Now everything apart from that will consist of your internal ear, or the inner portion of the ear, not internal ear, because you basically have divided ear into three parts: outer, middle and inner. So if you just call this as an exterior part, then the rest of it is the interior. Okay. So what do we have here? Here we have an auditory canal. Okay. So the auditory canal ends at a membranous portion known as the eardrum. It's a membranous covering, or you can call it as a membranous barrier between the between the outer ear and the middle ear. Okay, so the eardrum is basically a membranous flap. Okay, which is between the outer and middle ear. Very simple. Okay. So as soon as we cross the eardrum, we come into the middle ear. So what does it consist? It consists of three small ear bones, which are together known as ear ossicles. Okay. So these ear ossicles are basically placed sort of like this. Okay. 1, 2, 3. So now the significance of it is that it produces a lever-like action. What was a lever-like action? Lever is basically a simple machine which has a fulcrum, a load and an effort. So you put the load, and according to it, the basically the effort or the portion in hand, it moves, or it creates a sort of or it either changes the direction or it increases the speed with which you so basically what happens is that in a lever there's a fulcrum, there's a load and there's an effort. So by you giving the effort, the load accordingly moves. So the more you give the effort, the more the load will move. So in the same way, here basically the ear ossicles are placed in such a way that by the vibration of one, the vibration of the second is amplified, and by the vibration of the second, the third is amplified more. So basically the significance is that if you vibrate the first ear ossicle, by the time it comes to the third, the vibration has amplified multiple times. Okay. So here are the ear ossicles. That brings us to the end of the middle ear, and then we come into the inner ear. So what does the inner ear consist of? It consists of a cochlea and semicircular canals. So cochlea, as you can see, it's like a spiral portion, and here basically we get a lot of fluid, and we also get certain hair cells. So what's the significance of the hair cells and the fluid? I'll come across it later. And here are certain semicircular canals. They are also present 90° to each other. They are basically placed 90° to each other. Okay. So in between the ear and the cochlea, you get a plate-like portion, this portion, which connects the semicircular canal and the cochlea. This is known as the vestibule. It is also important, not exactly for the hearing purpose, but for the balancing purpose, which is not required in physics for now. Okay, so now we have sort of understood about the interior portion of the ear. Now, why are we discussing this? So, like, what is the significance of it? So, basically, when you hear a sound, okay, so I had told you in the first class that sound or any form of vibration is because the air particles or anything between you and the transmitter, any medium, they vibrate among their mean positions and transmit the energy to one another. And like this, finally, the transmission or the vibration comes to the air particle just in front of your ear. So as a result of this, your pinna starts vibrating. Okay, the energy is transmitted, you can understand. So when the pinna starts vibrating, what's happening is that the vibration is transmitted through your auditory canal, because air particles are produced here, are present here also, right? So your auditory canal air particles are also vibrated, and all these vibrations, they basically start vibrating the eardrum. Because the eardrum is a membranous flap, it will also vibrate rapidly. Now this vibration, as I told you, that the eardrum is attached to the ear ossicles in this manner. So if the eardrum starts vibrating, then obviously the first ear bone or the ear ossicle, from that to the second, and from that to the third, so all of them will start vibrating, and each time they vibrate, they will amplify the amount of vibration due to its lever-like action. Just write it here. Lever-like action. So by the time the third ear ossicle picks up on the vibration, the intensity of the vibration has increased a lot. So now what will happen is that it will transmit into the inner ear. That is, it will transmit into the cochlea and the semicircular canal simultaneously. Now I had told you previously that the cochlea has certain hair cells. So imagine that the cochlea, this is the inner portion of the cochlea, okay. So here the fluid is present all around, known as endolymph and perilymph, and here you will find certain hair cells. So what's happening is basically this fluid all around the cochlea is vibrating, and this vibration leads to the vibration of the hair cells. Now when the hair cells start vibrating, the ending of the hair cells, basically they consist of certain, I'll just draw it here. So if this is a hair cell, then the ending of the hair cell has certain nerve endings, like the base of the hair cell. So from here the vibration is picked up in the form of stimulus by the nerve, which is then transmitted to the brain. So you can very well understand now that a number of hair cells vibrating at the same time, so a number of nerve endings will come out of it, like a number of nerve endings here. So they will all together accumulate, and this is known as the auditory nerve. Like all the nerves together, they will form the auditory nerve as written here, and this will then go up to the brain, and the brain will interpret the sound signals, and accordingly the body will take action. Okay, so this in a much more structural way, you can copy it down if you want, is written here. So the outer ear is called the pinna. We talked about it. The collected sound passes through the auditory canal. At the end of the auditory canal, there is a thin membrane called the eardrum or the tympanic membrane. So now what happens at when a compression of the medium reaches the eardrum, the pressure on the outside of the membrane increases and forces the eardrum inward. So if the eardrum is a flap like this and too many vibrating particles are coming and throbbing across it, then what will happen is that the eardrum's shape will change to something like this, right? Because they are putting a pressure on it. Similarly, the eardrum moves outward when a rarefaction reaches it, opposite of compression, that is. In this way, the eardrum vibrates. The vibrations are amplified several times by the three bones hammer, anvil, stirrup, or they are known as malleus, incus, and stapes. Same thing. The middle ear transmits the amplified pressure variations received from the sound wave to the inner ear, like we talked about. In the inner ear, the pressure variations are turned into electrical signals by cochlea. These electrical signals are sent to the brain via the auditory nerve, and the brain interprets them as sound. So, just like we talked about in our previous slide. Okay. So, with this, we come to the end of the discussion of about sound and the transmission of sound. Now, let's just solve some simple problems, and we'll be done by this with this chapter. Okay, so what does this question say? That calculate the wavelength of a sound wave whose frequency is 20 hertz and speed is 440 meter per second in a given medium. Okay, so as we know that frequency is 1 by time period, right? And you know that the equation of speed is distance by time, and we can also write it as distance into frequency, right? So now when we are talking about sound, this distance is basically nothing but wavelength, because wavelength is the distance moved by the sound in one oscillation or to complete one oscillation. This is represented by lambda. So in other ways, we can write it S equals to lambda into frequency. So wavelength here is calculated by speed by frequency, or speed here is 440, frequency here is 220. So we get 2 meter. Simple. Okay. The second question says, a stone is dropped from the top of a tower 500 meter high. Okay, let's draw arbitrary 500 meter high tower into a pond. Okay, so there's a pond at the base of the tower. Cool. When is the splash heard at the top? Given g equals to 10 meter per second, speed of sound is 340. Okay, so first basically what we have to do is, if this stone is dropped here and it reaches ekdam the base of the tower where the pond is placed, then we have to at first calculate the time taken by the stone to fall, right? So this is a sum of the first part of the sum to find the time taken by the stone to drop. This we'll find by the equations that we discussed about in our first chapter, motion in one direction. So we have to basically find the time. What do we have here? We have the distance here, 500 meter. We have gravity, acceleration due to gravity here, 10 meter per second square. Okay, apart from that, we have the initial velocity to be 0 because it is dropped, right? It is free falling basically. Okay, so what we can use it, S equals to ut plus half gt square, right? And this is basically 0. So what we'll get is half into g into t square. We know S is 500 here. So t square is basically 500 into 2 divided by 10. So t square equals to 100, therefore t will be t equals to 10 seconds. So for the stone to drop at the base of the tower, it's taking 10 seconds. Okay. Another thing is that immediately when the stone is dropped, the sound is heard. But obviously the sound also takes some time to be produced, right? So what do we have to do here is basically we have to find out that when we are listening the sound, because remember we are 500 meter above the ground, so we will not hear it immediately. Even if the sound is produced immediately, we will hear it after a certain period of time. Now what is that certain period of time? We'll again use the equation that we used in the last sum, which is S equals to D by T. Now here we are just calculating sound and not echo, so we'll just do 500 divided by T, which is, and the speed here is given 340, so T is will come at around 1.47 seconds. Okay, so we have found here two times. One is the time taken by the stone to be dropped and the other is the time for the sound to be heard, right? So the total time after which the splash is heard at the top is the time the stone takes to fall and the time the stone takes to produce, which is basically, just use another color, so which is basically 10 plus 1.47, which is equals to 11.47 seconds approx. Okay, just give a star mark here so that you can understand when you're going through the notes later. Okay. So the last sum for today is about a sonar device on a submarine which sends out a signal and receives an echo 5 seconds later. Calculate the speed of sound in water if the distance of the object from the submarine is 3625 meter. Okay, so let this be a submarine here and let the seabed be somewhere around here. So what they are saying that they are hearing the echo after 5 seconds. It means that the sound has transmitted and reflected, and the whole time calculated here, like going down and then coming up 5 seconds. Okay, the distance is 3625, but the distance covered by the sound to reach the submarine back is 3625 into 2, right? So distance will be basically 3625 into 2, okay, which is coming to around 7350 meter. Okay, so now we have the distance, we have the time. Now what we have to calculate is the speed of sound. Okay, so S equals to 2D by T, and we've already found out 2D here, 7350 divided by T, which is 5. So if we calculate here, what we are getting is ones are 5. Around 1470 meter per second. Yeah. So from here we get the speed of sound in water, which is 1470 meter per second. Okay. So these are some very easy conceptual sums. Then this is all that you're going to get, like all types we've discussed here. So if you get, it will be as a variety of, as a combination of these sums only. So that will be all for today, and the next day we're going to start with a new chapter. Thank you for listening.